Welcome to the first webinar in our Healthy Yards series. There's going to be 4 total, so if you like this one, I hope you keep coming back. But my name is Karina. I'm the Member Communications Specialist at Save the Sound. And before we start, I just want to go over some things, cover some stuff. The first thing I want to do is kind of a tech side PSA. We are recording this webinar so that people can go back and watch it later if they're missing it, or so you guys can go back and watch it later and share it with your friends. So please stay on mute for the entire presentation. If you do not stay on mute, there is a chance that you'll show up in the recording. So just make sure you're staying on mute. If you have questions, please type them into the chat. If you look towards the bottom of your screen, there should be a chat button. So if you have questions throughout the presentation, please throw them in the chat. We'll answer them at the end. But as I said, while the presentation is going on, please try to stay on mute. That's about it for the tech side. So before we dive in, just a little bit more about Save the Sound. If you are new to the organization, Save the Sound leads environmental action in your region. We fight climate change, save endangered lands, protect the sound and its rivers, and work with nature to restore ecosystems. We do this in a lot of ways. That's what makes us a little unique in our region. We work through legislative advocacy and legal action, through engineering and environmental monitoring, and then through our hands-on volunteer efforts. And together we restore and protect all that impacts the Long Island Sound region's environment, from rivers and shorelines to wetlands and forests, and from the air we breathe to the waters of the Sound itself. We've been doing this for over 40 years, ensuring that people and wildlife can enjoy the healthy, clean, and thriving environment they deserve today and for generations to come. And all of that work is possible because of supporters like you. So if you are able and you enjoy this webinar and want to support our work, please consider making a donation at savethesound.org/donate. When I'm done talking, I will pop that link in the chat so that you don't have to search for it. I will also pop a link into our Stay Engaged page where you can find all of our upcoming events, including the other 3 Healthy Yards webinars, so that will be there. And then before I hand the mic over to our wonderful speaker, I just wanted to give everyone a little bit more information about him. So we are incredibly happy to have Tony Piazza joining us. He grew up in the rural settings of upstate New York in the foothills of the Adirondack Mountains. He's innately informed by nature and natural settings because of that. So after receiving his formal education at Cornell University and honing his design skills at various companies, he founded Piazza Horticulture in 1998. And because of his reputation as a first-class plantsman with a strong eye for design, the firm steadily grew to what it is today, a pioneer in the field of environmentally sound design and maintenance practices. Leading a team of 30 members in the field and office, as well as a stable of proven related service providers, he approaches all projects with confidence and pride. Tony lives and gardens in Southampton Village and is deeply involved in his community as the award-winning designer of the East Hampton Village Bioswale Project, a groundbreaking public awareness project that was one of the first public-private partnerships, creating a model for other villages to aspire to regarding water quality issues. He also sits on many boards and committees, including the Longhouse Reserve Garden Committee, CT NOFA's Certified Organic Land Care Practitioner, and Perfect Earth Project. He's a board member there as well. So we're very excited to have him. He has a lot of great information to share with you guys. And without further ado, I'm gonna pass it over to him.
Thank you for that amazing introduction. My head's a little swollen from that, but I'm really just a down-to-earth garden geek at heart. Again, I'm Tony Piazza, and I was one of the first people in Eastern Long Island to start maintaining landscapes without any chemicals. And I don't know if many of you know where I live, but I live in this place called the Hamptons. And it's not known for people kind of relaxing and letting go and letting nature take its course. So in the beginning of things, it was a little difficult to convert our clients. But 22 years later, here we are, and kind of the IT company as far as environmental concern goes. But today I'm here wearing my hat as a board member of the Perfect Earth Project, which is a nonprofit that was organized and dedicated to promoting toxic-free lawns and landscapes for the health of people, their pets, and the planet. This is a photograph from Marsh House, which is my friend Edwina Von Gall's house in East Hampton. She literally lives in a marsh. Her house is on stilts, was built a very long time ago in the 60s. Something that wouldn't be allowed to happen in this day and age, but this house and the marsh in front of it couldn't have a better steward, because Edwina is extremely dedicated to making sure that her property is taken care of without toxins. She started Perfect Earth Project in response to the greater public awareness to the dangers of chemicals and fertilizers we use in our landscapes and water quality issues. It's kind of a funny story. She was in the dentist's office, and she had her mouth kind of full of dentist hands, and this guy lived on the water, and he was saying to her, you know, I don't feel comfortable putting all these chemicals down on my lawn. What should I do? And she was kind of struggling to answer him, but she didn't really have a good answer. And if anybody knows Edwina, she made sure that she found out the answer. And the result of it is Perfect Earth Project, where we're basically doing everything we can to promote toxic-free landscape maintenance. Non-agricultural landscapes, that's our homes, parks, public spaces, use 3 times more chemical inputs than agricultural land does. That's per square foot. Homeowners aren't regulated the way we use these chemicals because we don't eat what we're putting them down on. But in spite of that, we walk, roll around in them, breathe the air around them, and these chemicals are entering our water supply. American homeowners use 66 million pounds of pesticides on their property per year. That's not including what the professionals are using. The dangers of these chemicals to human health is manifested in many ways. Cancers, endocrine disruption, renal failure, just to mention a few. And they're especially dangerous to the most susceptible of us, our children and our pets. Not only are these chemicals dangerous to human health, but they're also contaminating our watersheds. This is a picture of Georgica Pond in East Hampton with the most beautiful shade of blue-green. But as a lot of us know, that's actually a highly toxic blue-green algae that produces a cyanotoxin that is very, very dangerous to mammals. This pond is actually kind of famous for one of the residents' dogs dying from drinking the water there, and it really kicked off a major campaign to clean up that water body. 30% of all nitrogen pollution that causes toxic blue-green algae blooms is from residential landscape runoff. So how did we get here? So reliant on chemicals to manage a natural system. It was sort of after the war, when the war ended, there were a lot of soldiers returning that what we know not today is PTSD. They were returning home, and they sort of found comfort in order and tidiness, basically military life. There were lots of chemicals left over from the war, and of course Madison Avenue got involved and sort of figured out ways to use these leftover chemicals and market them very wisely, as you can see in this vintage advertisement, DDT is good for me. And then this was also the time of easy living through chemistry. And of course, the whole family could get involved. Another vintage advertisement. They were coming up with products that were very easy to use. So it was part of American leisure time. Get the family together, make that lawn perfect with as little energy as possible. Sadly, the dandelion was used as the target for promotional reasons. To this day, dandelions in a lawn are sort of a sign of an unkept property and not celebrated as the earliest pollen source for honeybees that they are. Garden designers at the time were introducing exotic plant material from around the globe that was easy to maintain and had relatively few pest problems. And that makes a lot of sense because they left all their pests in the countries that they came from. So we didn't have natural insects in this country that evolved with these plants. So they were easy to take care of, but really offered nothing to the natural landscape as far as wildlife service. So what we were left with is the current state of the American landscape, basically sterile, completely disconnected from its natural surroundings. But humans are really good at kind of messing things up, but we're also really good at fixing them. So what can we do about this? I think number one, what we're talking about today is definitely stop using toxic chemicals and water-soluble fertilizers, that's a mouthful, in our landscapes. The landscape can be a well-balanced natural system that doesn't need any inputs. Think of a forest. If you walk into a forest, nobody's out there fertilizing it, certainly not killing any insects. Think about a meadow. Very minimal input. Usually most meadows are just grazed by wildlife. Sometimes meadows are mowed once or twice a year by a farmer, but for all intents and purposes, they're surviving on the soil conditions that they were given in natural rainfall. So I'm going to just quickly run through some very specific things that you can do to help your lawn transition in your landscape tradition from a traditional, high input maintenance to low input maintenance. Mow high and mow sharp. What I mean by this is to keep your grass at about 4 inches high. So what we say is grow to 4, cut to 3.5. And a really easy way to measure that is to take a traditional credit card and put it the long way up in your lawn. And that's about how high you want your lawn to be after it was mowed. And by mowing sharp, it means using mower blades that have been sharpened. They do less damage to the ends of the leaf blades and thereby cutting down the amount of diseases that can enter the grass plant through an open wound. Mulch mowing basically is a mower that doesn't pick up the clippings because you want to leave the grass clippings on the lawn. Grass clippings are actually the best fertilizer for your lawn because if you leave them there, they'll fall into the soil profile and earthworms and other insects and beneficial funguses will decompose them and take the nitrogen that the plant used to grow and put it right back into the soil. And the same thing with leaves. We like to promote leaving the leaves in the fall, if at all possible. If you can mow your leaves into smaller particles and leave them right on your lawn, they do the same thing as grass clippings do. They decompose over time, build organic matter in the soil, and just take those, instead of taking away from the system, they're putting everything, all the energy back into the system in the form of organic nitrogen and organic matter. If you think about it, if you're using a fungicide on your lawn, you're also killing all the beneficial funguses on the plants and in the soil. And it's all about soil health. We want to encourage people to love clover. Clover is an essential part of an organic lawn because it is a legume, which is capable of, it's a plant that's capable of actually pulling gaseous nitrogen out of the air, fixing it into its roots, and then allowing that nitrogen to go into the soil to feed the turf grasses. It's also very beneficial for pollinating insects and honeybees. So clover is almost an essential, it is an essential element of an organic lawn. And, you know, a lot of people say that it's so clumpy, and it is, the clover loves cool weather. So it's apt to come up sooner than the turf grasses in the spring. So while the turf grasses are still dormant, the clover is going to emerge sooner, and the lawn will have somewhat of an uneven look. But usually by late May, everybody's sort of caught up with each other, and the clover sort of just disappears into the profile of the lawn. And it actually recedes a little bit from the heat in the summer and then comes back like gangbusters again in the fall. And the flowers typically get mowed off each time you mow. So if you don't want to see clover flowers in your lawn, they generally disappear with each mowing. And it's very easy to seed clover into a lawn. We advocate for watering seldomly and watering for a long time. So, you know, in the Northeast, our rainfalls are typically like large events where, especially in the summer, you'll get an inch of rain at a time, and then you'll go for a week without any rain, hopefully, if we want to enjoy summer. So the best thing to do with an irrigation system is try to mimic that natural rainfall. So rather than setting your irrigation system to run every day or every other day, it's better to water once a week and water very heavily, where you would put down a couple inches of water a week to water the lawn. That's going to force the grass roots to go deeper into the soil to search for moisture, which will give the grass much more resiliency in warm periods of time and in drought periods. So water long and water deep. And the other thing I want to talk about is, if you don't have an automatic irrigation system and you use a sprinkler, just do the same thing. Just water once a week heavily. And if you do have an automatic irrigation system, we're encouraging people to set up their controllers, their time clocks, on the new Wi-Fi time clocks. They're relatively inexpensive, and you can run them from an app on your phone that is tied into NOAA. And it sort of monitors rainfall in your area. It'll help you determine what your lawn actually needs for water. So it takes a lot of the guesswork out and puts the control of the irrigation in the palm of your hand, rather than having to run into the basement or run out to the shed. You know, if we get a pop-up storm and the irrigation is supposed to come on that night, you can just put it on rain delay and then just put it back to the normal setting after that storm's passed. We also advocate maintaining biomass. So when you think about it, your landscape is a very large garden, so to say. It's producing leaves, it's producing twigs. In traditional landscape maintenance, a lot of that material would just be taken away and put into a landfill. So if you're leaving the clippings on your lawn, you're not removing any of the biomass from the lawn. If you're saving the leaves and clipping those up into the lawn or putting them in a compost pile, you're leaving biomass. But if you have a property that is larger in scale and you can afford the space to do things like hay mounds and log walls, all of that carbon, if it could stay on your property, is good, because it provides compost for the soil, builds healthy soil, and also it has really good benefits for wildlife. All sorts of critters, good critters, would want to live in that log wall until it slowly decomposes. And definitely start composting. Anything that comes out of your kitchen that's organic, and anything that comes out of the garden, a vegetable garden or an ornamental garden, and definitely leaf fall, can be composted. And it can be done on any scale. It could be done at this scale. Oops, sorry about that. I guess I forgot a slide. It could also be done at a larger scale if you have a large property. I happen to live on a very tiny property. It's less than a quarter acre in the village of Southampton here. And I found these great terracotta pots that were cylinders about 4 feet tall. And I have them dotted throughout my garden. And I just throw all of my garden clippings and kitchen waste into those throughout the summer. And it's just a very small vertical compost pile that I invert every fall right into some of the garden beds and just spread that material out. So composting can be done at any level for any size property, and it's highly recommended. We want you to mind the mulch. This is what we call a tree volcano. A lot of reasons not to do this. Most importantly is that the root flare of this tree is no longer exposed. So that mulch basically has a chokehold on the trunk of the tree, which is not good. It's robbing it of air and oxygen that actually would be at a certain level for the roots to use. Roots, people don't realize that even though they're underground, they need air. So the roots have to be at a certain level in the soil. And when you disturb that, it puts the tree into distress, which then sends out a signal for all the bad insects to come in and feed on it, because they know that it can't really build up its natural defenses. So mulching, we kind of stay away from. The other part of this is for people that don't do their own lawns and hire professionals to do it. I would say 98% of the professionals out there have no idea how to do organic landscape care. So it's some of the onus is going to be on you to educate your landscaper as well. And there are a lot of courses out there that you can recommend. This isn't going to change until the consumer puts pressure on industry. So the more people that are saying to their landscaper, we want you to truly go organic, here's how you can get educated, the faster this is all going to turn around. And I think one of the biggest things to think about in organic land care is letting go and relaxing a little bit. We've sort of taken the tidiness of our homes, the inside of our homes, out into our landscapes, and it's not always the best thing for a landscape. So consider initiatives where you could maybe reduce lawn and put in more garden. If you have a larger scale property, you could do a meadow area rather than a mowed area. Sort of letting go and relaxing and letting nature come back into the landscape. And the basic idea would be to make every landscape a refuge for you and for wildlife. Again, it's about connecting your property and yourself to your natural surroundings. Oops. So that brings me to another thing that Perfect Earth is working on. We've just launched an initiative called 2/3 for the birds. It suggests that 2/3 of the plants in your property be native plants. We're facing an incredible bird loss to the point where if it goes on much longer, it's not going to be reversible. And Doug Tallamy has done some amazing research and has sort of, to make a long story short, calculated that if we could get 2/3 of the plants in our landscapes to be native plants, that'll support the native insects and habitat that these birds need to turn around their populations. And how can you help? I'm going to talk a little more now about helping the birds, but it's also part of organic landscaping. We say share generously. If you see plant leaves that have been nibbled like this, it should be celebrated, because that means some insect has been eating them, and that insect becomes food for these guys. So there's no native pest that's going to defoliate a tree. So if there's a little light nibbling, it's good. It's actually sort of intentional by nature, because as the trees are full of leaves and heavy throughout the summer, toward the later part of the summer, when these insect populations are at their highest, the insects that eat them actually start alleviating weight, making the trees more resilient to storms. And it's also the beginning of the decomposition process of the foliage that would fall off of a tree. Habitat piles, again, any size property could have a habitat pile. A habitat pile could be a 2x2 pile of twigs. but you'd be surprised what that can do to help birds that need a refuge to get away from a hawk or chipmunks. And it's also, again, part of keeping the biomass on the property. The deadwood, we talk about deadwood as an endangered habitat. You know, we've become so accustomed to removing every single dead tree and dead twig and dead branch off of our plants in our landscapes, and not realizing that they're actually homes for insects and all sorts of cavity nesting birds. So again, it kind of goes back to relaxing a little bit, maybe leave any dead wood in a tree where it's not in a dangerous position, where it could fall on someone, and even consider leaving a dead tree up. They're called snags. Birds will nest in them like crazy, and it can give you a lot of enjoyment in your landscape just as much as flowers would. So if you were out in your garden, you saw something like this on one of your plants, you might be apt to say, Tony Piazza, you're crazy. I'm going to run to the store and get some insecticide and kill that ugly thing because it's very scary to me. But this little guy in 21 days turns into this guy. So we all know and love ladybugs. They do a lot of help for us in our garden. This ladybug is feeding on aphids. That looks like it's on a lupin leaf or something. So again, let nature take its course. Let the native bugs do their thing, learn from them, share it with kids. And then another thing that we talk about is designing for independence. This is a project that we did right here in the Hamptons where we brought the meadow right up to the edge of the pool. No reason to have lawn on all four sides of your pool. It kind of makes you feel like you're in nature while you're in the pool. And then also designing for resilience. This photograph shows a very well-planted buffer zone at the edge of a water body. So any water runoff or sheeting from the lawn that's on the upper part of the property is slowed down and absorbed by these wetland plants before it actually hits the water body. So this is Edwina's dog, Clover. She actually named her dog Clover when she started the Perfect Earth Project. And Clover and I would like to ask everybody in the audience if they could make a commitment. And that would be a commitment to trying to getting reconnected with your natural surroundings and consider switching your landscape to toxic-free management, because it's important for all of us. It's important for us, it's important for our families, and it's important for the survival of our fragile planet. And that's the end of my presentation. And usually this presentation is much more about the questions and answers. So I'm ready for you whenever you are. Bring on the questions.
All right, I'm gonna start at the beginning and just kind of go through them. They're a little all over the place, so we'll just go in order. The first question is, how can I get rid of phragmites on my waterfront property on Great South Bay? I just have small areas now without using Roundup or rodeo. Okay,
that's a great question. And it's something that we deal with every day. And I have a lot of experience with it. Phragmites is very difficult to control. If it's actually in the water, I mean, if you can't get in there with a backhoe and actually dig it out and then revegetate, the only thing you can do is cut. And the timing of those cuts is very important. If you can cut it, if you can cut it and keep it shorter than 12 inches every time you cut, it will eventually die off. And if you can get it covered with water, it actually can't live drowned. Like if water comes into the stems, you'll most likely kill it. So it's basically, it could be a multi-year project, but you just have to keep at it. But please don't use Roundup.
Awesome. The other question, or another question, are cedar oil applications to control mosquitoes damaging to other insect populations?
They are. The cedar product that is on the market is called cedar side. In Latin, that CIDE, the root of that is to kill. So if it's going to kill mosquitoes, it's going to kill everything else. Mosquitoes are a tricky one, especially with waterfront properties. Airflow is super important. It's one of the things that'll help. And I mean, I'm from a different neck of the woods, but when we have parties here, we have people that put out big fans and just keep the air moving to keep the mosquitoes away. It's not a foolproof thing, but encourage bats, put up bat houses. They eat gazillions of mosquitoes every night. But any insecticide that you use to kill mosquitoes is going to kill beneficial insects as well, to answer the question.
Do you have suggestions for eliminating, controlling, or managing an extensive spread of Japanese knotweed?
Yeah, it's sort of the same practices you would do for phragmites. It's just cut, or excavate it out and bring it somewhere where somebody else will have to deal with. No, any plant needs a photosynthetic area to survive. So it needs leaves to build up its root system, build up its reserves so that it can actually grow. So the more you cut it, it will eventually disappear, but you just have to be tenacious and keep cutting.
Awesome. So many questions. Okay, Donna wants to know, so she lives in Western New York on a 1-acre monoculture of grass with clay soil, very high deer pressure, and many wet spots. In parentheses, she wrote butterfly garden place, ? No pesticides used. What do you suggest? It has to be inexpensive.
Okay, so I'm not sure what Donna's asking in the first question. What to do with the lawn? Like how to reduce that lawn?
Maybe.
Okay.
If Donna wants to unmute and clarify, she can do that.
How does she reduce it? Okay, I just saw that, Donna. Okay, so if it's clay soil and it's wet, you've got the perfect situation for a wetland garden, basically. I would just reduce the lawn area and then seed it with plant material that can handle that heavy clay soil. And you said you're in Western New York, so that's probably a zone 4 or 5. There are plenty of things that you could grow. Eupatoriums that are native and can handle heavy wet clay soils. Mallows, Hibiscus machadus, which grows in the wetland areas around here. If you introduce that, also very easy to grow from seed. Seed is going to be the least expensive way to do it. And as far as getting rid of the turf, probably the best way to do that is to plan ahead and do the cardboard newspaper trick and just actually put heavy layers of cardboard and paper on the ground in the shape of the bed that you want and put some mulch on top of it. And in about 3 months, you'll have killed off the turf. And a lot of that cardboard will actually have decomposed to the point where you can mix it into the soil and give it a little organic matter. Donna just said something about the deer, which I forgot about. All those plants that I told you about, Donna, forget about it because the deer are going to eat them to the ground. You have to use grasses. So you would want to introduce carex, anything in the carex family, anything in the panicum family. Equisedum would do well in wet, but you want to use grasses that, and when I say grass, I'm not talking about a turf grass. I'm talking about a native grass, any of those grasses that can handle wet situations. So panicums and carexes predominantly. Okay, next question.
Japanese maples, are those leaves okay to decompose in the fall? They don't have any toxicities or anything, do they?
They don't, and they're fine.
Awesome. This is the question I was dreading because I don't know how to pronounce this word. Linda says she has mostly zoysia grass.
You pronounced it perfectly.
I did it great. Awesome. If I leave it, it sits on top of the lawn and never gets down into the soil. Any thoughts on that?
Okay, so just so everybody understands, zoysia grass is like a semi-tropical grass that in the 50s was very popular because it spreads almost like bamboo underground. And it's super drought tolerant and needs like 0 fertilizer. So it answered a lot of questions. It does have one drawback. It goes dormant very early in the summer and it wakes up very late in the spring because it's a warm season grass. But I know that it sits on top, but those blades should, in the heat of the sun, curl up pretty quickly and get crispy where they'll find their way in. You might need to take a rake or a broom or even an electric blower and kind of distribute them a little bit, but I wouldn't take them away if you can not do that.
Linda lives on a lake. One of her neighbors is a heavy chemical user. The other has left the yard to overgrow, allowing every conceivable invasive to proliferate. Do you have any ideas on what she might be able to do?
Lead by example. I know we can only control what's under our control, and there's nothing you can do about that. We have these great signs at the Perfect Earth Project that says toxic free landscape, perfect landscape. And sometimes by putting that out, I have one out in the front of my house, and all my neighbors were like, what's that all about? So I started explaining it to them, and now they call me Mr. Perfect. But I was surprised that 2 or 3 of them started kind of adopting some of the principles and stuff. So I think the only thing to do is lead by example.
This is Donna. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, this is a question. Is there a sustainable renewing forage for deer for a flat, heavy, clay, wet soil in the midst of a monocultured neighborhood? Renewing.
I don't know. I'm not a forestry expert, so
Okay.
I don't know what could be done for the deer. They're eating. The problem with the deer, again, it's a natural system out of balance. Their populations are out of control.
They are.
So they're eating more than they should, and they're not allowing the natural food that they would eat to regenerate. So that deer are a whole other topic that I really, that's a whole nother seminar, but they need to be managed as they were through the millennia with coexisting with human beings.
Yes.
So I don't have any great.
It's like living with a herd. The whole lawn is like hoof prints. Just yeah.
Okay.
So, okay. Thank you.
Sure.
I switched computers.
Okay.
Okay. So sorry about that, guys. Let me find where I was. Let's see. So many good questions. How do you address concerns about the risk of ticks in naturalized habitats?
Okay, good question. It comes up, and every time I do this talk, it comes up. So my basic message with ticks is that they're out to get us, and there's no perfect answer to your question, except I could tell you 1,000,001 things to help repel ticks, and I'll give you a few examples. But the most important thing to do is self-check, because you can leave your protected area and go to the beach and pick up more ticks than you would have in your protected area. So ticks don't like cedar. They loathe cedar. So if you do have mulched paths or something, use cedar mulch. If you are sort of decreasing lawn and you want to maybe have paths through a mowed meadow, minimum 6 feet wide. I like to tell people 8 feet wide, so that you're far enough away from those tall grasses. Ticks need humidity, they need moisture, humidity, and tall grasses pretty much to survive. So if you are mowing your lawn weekly, a mowed lawn is one of the least likely places to get a tick. I'm not going to say that you'll never get a tick on a mowed lawn, but it's one of the least likely places. So stay out of the tall grasses in the natural areas, and definitely self-check. One of the most brilliant things I've ever heard for the self-check with ticks is a lint roller. The old-fashioned, like, remove your lint from your sweater, just all over your skin, all over your legs, and you'd be surprised. It even picks up the little larval ticks that can be a real problem in the late summer. And I would say that increasing wildlife on your property, there are certain birds that go after ticks too. So
Awesome.
I've also used cedar oil on my boots. I wear high boots all the time, and I actually put cedar oil on my clothing and on my boots. So I'm just like reek of cedar. And it seems to help a little bit, but there's no perfect cure for that.
Okay. What is a good way to combat weeds in the lawn? Is corn gluten an acceptable solution?
Okay, that's a great question. Boy, I love this audience because you're
Yeah.
hitting on all the right things. Corn gluten is not an acceptable option, mainly because its efficacy is minimal, and it's adding nitrogen to the system. It's adding nitrogen at a time of year when you don't want too much nitrogen in the system. So the mowing high is probably one of the best things for reducing. If the turf stand is healthy enough, it will shade out the weed situations. And it can take a couple of years for this to happen. It can, especially with crabgrass, but mowing high and watering properly are probably the best way to combat weeds in the lawn. Oh shoot, I lost my train of thought because there was another thing about weeds in the lawn. Mowing high, corn gluten. Okay, it'll come back to me.
There's a lot more questions, so
Okay.
plenty of time for it to come back to you. How do you eradicate Asiatic bittersweet?
That's also a good question. The only way we do it, it's hard to, it's with us forever. The way that we eradicate it in established areas, like if we take on a project that's where there is a wooded area that's been neglected and has some very mature vines, we just cut them because those vines grew at a time when they weren't shaded. A vine's job is to grow up to the sky as fast as possible by whatever means it can get there to absorb light. So let's say you have a forested situation where there are stands of cedars and maybe oaks and stuff, if you cut those major vines, the plant will most likely die because it just can't resprout. It won't have enough light to really get going enough to get back up to that canopy. And then, I even on my little tiny lot here, I find seedlings all over the place. The birds are spreading it, but we cut the vines right to the ground and we don't pull them out of the trees. We leave them to just dry and fall out on their own. But that's the best I can do for Oriental bittersweet.
Okay. Can you address the importance of decreasing your lawn size since it is a biological desert?
Yeah, do it. I mean, it's super important. Because I like to use this analogy. Wall-to-wall carpeting is out, area rugs are in. So you don't need a lot of lawn, really. Parks in athletic fields need a lot of lawn, but homes don't really need lawn. You'd be surprised how much of your lawn you actually use and enjoy. So why not either let it be a taller grass meadow or a native plant planting? It's super important. And it's less input that you need as far as water and all of that just to keep the lawn going. I forgot to tell everybody, the Perfect Earth Project has a handbook for lawn and property care. It's called the Perfect Handbook, and I think it's available on our website. So if anybody's interested in this, a lot of the things that I talked about are really well outlined in here if you didn't take good notes.
Awesome. And this is being recorded, so you can also watch this again, just
right.
So everyone knows. So all these great questions, you can re-listen to them over and over. Okay, Donna wants to know, she uses a product that's a deer fence. It's composed of putrid eggs, thyme, etc. Is this okay?
It's fine.
Awesome, easy questions. Okay, so the next one I'm also really interested in. Somebody said they would like to see your terracotta compost bins. Is there a cover on them, a hole in the bottom? Do you have a rodent problem? I have a small yard in the city and I'd love to compost, but I assumed I didn't have enough space.
Should we take this show on the road? Let me see if I can do it.
Let's see if it works. This has been a lovely webinar. I'm so glad you're all here.
Oh yeah, I can rotate the screen. Cool. So this is my kitchen. This is my yard. It's really tiny, the backyard. So were really intended to be pocket planters. Can you still hear me?
Yep. I
Okay.
can still hear you.
There's one. And you can
You're breaking up a little bit. You're probably a little too far from Wi-Fi.
ground in front of it. Okay. Better?
A little bit better. Yep.
Am I back?
Yep.
Okay. Did everybody see that?
It showed up on my screen. So yes, I think everybody got a chance to see it.
All right. Yeah. So that's one of them. You know, I just want to, it's spring, so nothing's blooming here, but after we started 2/3 for the birds, I installed this planting last year. That was, it's clethra, Ilex verticillata, and some calycanthus, all native shrubs that are butterfly and bee plants. Okay, let's see. All right, next question.
All right. Yeah. So I'm going to pause just because it's 12:55 and some people have said they have to go back to work. We're going to continue. We will definitely get to all your questions. But if you guys need to hop off, thank you for coming. I hope you got a lot out of this. I know I loved it. Lots of great tips here. Some people in the chat are saying they didn't get a chance to see the terracotta bins. And yes, posting a photo I think is a great idea. Tony, if you would be willing to send me a photo, we will send a follow-up to everybody who registered for this one webinar, and we'll throw it in there. So you will all get a chance to see those photos. And like I said, thank you for coming. Please feel free to check out savethesound.org/stayengaged for all our future upcoming events. And thanks. Now we'll get back to the questions for everyone that can stay with us. Okay, so we covered the terracotta bins. Okay, Jennifer says that she hates crabgrasses and she wants to know how she can reduce them without commercial lawn treatments.
All the things that I talked about in the lawn care section. Water wisely, mow high. You know, something I forgot to talk about is overseeding your lawn is kind of important to every fall. Do an overseeding, and that will help boost the populations of the beneficial turf grasses and give it a chance to push out the crabgrass. Crabgrass needs warm soil and it needs light to germinate. So, and it's a warm season grass, so it doesn't really start doing its thing until the summer. So if you can get your turf stand happy and thick enough, it's really going to push out a lot of crabgrass.
Awesome. All right, I love this question too. Any landscaping tips for attracting owls and bats?
Oh, yes, actually, I should flip. I'm going to flip the screen again because I put up owl houses and bat houses. That's the answer. Let's see. So can you see that tree back there in the corner? There's a birdhouse on it.
Yes.
That's actually an owl house, and that is occupied with screech owls as we speak. They're nesting. So, see, I practice what I preach. Wildlife housing is really important, and it's hard to find the good stuff. So I know I'm not supposed to promote products, but one of the best suppliers for bird houses is a company called Schwegler. It's a German company, and the Europeans are light years ahead of us as far as taking care of their wildlife. They have a house for just about everything, including hedgehogs. But the Schwegler houses are made with a mixture of concrete and cellulose fiber. So they kind of recreate what a tree trunk would be for cavity nesting birds, and they last forever. And I've had some for so long that they're actually encrusted with lichens and stuff now, and I forget that they're in the trees, but super, I mean, they just work really well. The birds love them. And the diameter of the hole the entry hole on a birdhouse is what determines the type of bird that'll nest in that house. So the Schwegler birdhouses have different diameters for different birds. And the best place that I know of to get Schwegler birdhouses in the States is a company called Kinsman Company. They don't have the owl house, but you can Google Schwegler owl houses, and there are a few people out there that sell them if you want to try to get the screech owls into your garden. And screech owls will live in the smallest village garden. They're all over.
I am typing that name in the chat because we got a request for it.
Oh, great.
Schwegler. Okay, there's that name. A few more questions. Let's see. I'm in the part of the chat where everyone's talking about my sound. So, okay. How about composting Norway maple leaves? Nothing grows under the tree except saplings, so it makes me think the leaves may be toxic.
Okay, so that toxic situation is called alleliopathy. It's a long word. And Norway maples are not alleliopathic. They don't secrete a chemical that kills plants, but what they do is they outcompete anything under them because they use up so much water. Their roots are so high on the surface that nothing can get a root hold under there because there's never any available moisture. And the Norway maple is a great example of an invasive exotic that it's not native to the States, but it sure is happy here. And it has almost zero wildlife service. So I did a project on Shelter Island a couple of years ago that had a lot of very large Norway maples. And I told them we were cutting them all down and replacing them with native trees. And it was tough for the client, but they bought in because they were so dedicated to, changing the environment. It was a waterfront property, but Norway maples are definitely a problem. Their leaves are fine for composting. It's just organic matter, but nothing eats their leaves, and they don't allow anything to grow under them. So it makes it a very difficult plant in the garden.
Awesome. Mayor Kurt Lang, he's the mayor of Hamden. He's here with us. So thanks for joining us. Glad you could come. He says, as a community, we work in Hamden to really minimize pesticides, but I haven't heard a solution to poison ivy without chemicals. Do you have any ideas?
Again, it's hand removal, and I know that sounds horrible, but poison ivy is actually a really good plant in the landscape as far as wildlife service. Birds love it. And a lot of insects feed off of it, but the only way to do it, to eradicate it, is hand removal or mechanical, with a machine. There's no, and I can't think of any other way to do that other than shading it out. You have to wear Tyvek suits and double glove. It's not fun.
It doesn't sound it.
No.
Okay. Can you address butterfly gardens? Should you put in a wet space? Would milkweed and butterfly weed work in it?
Yeah, I mean, you can put a butterfly garden in any soil situation. It just depends on the plant material that you use. So in the milkweed family, the butterfly weed family, that's the Asclepias family. There are Asclepias that grow really well in wet soil. That's Asclepias incarnata is the swamp milkweed. But then the one that grows in really dry meadow areas is Asclepias tuberosa, which is the orange one, the pretty orange one. But definitely pollinator, anything you can do to help pollinators as far as flowers go is good. And there's a plant for every situation.
Awesome. Can you recommend an overseed for grass? How about overseed for a meadow?
Okay. They're two very different situations, but turf grasses, I actually have to look at the perfect handbook because I don't have it memorized, but you should always use a blend. You should have a blend of, well, as little bluegrass as possible, but bluegrasses, rye, and fescues. And you know what? That mix is available online, that those proportions, but you should always overseed with a mix. And then as far as a meadow goes, once they're established, they're sort of self-sustaining. They kind of seed themselves every year. The key is not to mow a meadow until this time of year. You want to leave all of the tall grasses up so that they have a chance to drop their seeds. And there are a lot of endangered native bees that actually overwinter in the stems of native grasses. So don't cut meadows until late spring. But if you really want to give your meadow a little extra help, I would always recommend throwing little blue stem Sazachyrium seed and Aragrostis spectabulus, which is purple love grass. Panicum can be a little bit of a bully in a meadow, so you have to be careful with it. I wouldn't seed that in unless it's already occurring there. But if you want to overseed a meadow, the best thing to do is identify the warm season grasses that are in the meadow and put down more of those seeds.
Cool. We are down to our last 2 questions, so we're almost there. The next one is, I thought you had to clean birdhouses every year. Is that true?
It is true. Usually late winter, I go through and take out last year's nest and let them start fresh. I don't clean the owl nest though. The owls, they'll lay their eggs on a stone if it's in the nest. So I usually, when I hang an owl nest, I fill it with some wood chips at the bottom and then just never touch it. They're fine with that. But other cavity nesting bird houses should be cleaned every spring. Do it in the late winter before they start nesting.
All right, so our last question. We want to plant a meadow in place of our lawn, but we have a large oak tree that makes dense shade. Is it worth it to get rid of the tree? I have read that it attracts about 500 different pollinators. It's a lot of pollinators.
If you cut down that oak tree, I will hunt you down. No. Oak trees, you're right. Oak trees are the best tree for our native wildlife. So I would work with that oak tree, and you're going to have to work with plants that can coexist with it. So again, the caryxes, Caryx pennsylvanica, it's not the most exciting grass in the world, but it will live in the shade of an oak tree. It naturally occurs with oaks. And if you don't have deer pressure, you can use some of the native ferns. Lady fern, hay-scented fern does really well in a dry shade area, and it spreads like crazy once it's happy. And then some of the ephemeral wildflowers would be good. You could introduce trilliums, maybe some bluebells, some mertensia. It's not really native to this area, but it will be in a couple more years of global warming, so might as well start now, right?
All right.
Yeah.
That was our last question. So do you have any final thoughts or final things you want to get out before we end?
No, I just hope that it was inspiring, and I just want everybody to know that there's help out there. Just email us at the Perfect Earth Project, or there are a lot of organizations that are popping up around these issues, and just have fun with it. Let go, have fun with it, and get reconnected with your natural surroundings.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Tony, so much for joining us. Thank you to everybody for joining us. I had a great time. I wrote like a full page of notes, and I live in an apartment, so I don't even have a real lawn to myself. So I hope you all learned a lot too, because I'm excited. But we'll wrap up. And like I said, we will send a follow-up email. It will have this recording so you can go back and watch it. And we'll throw in some useful links and different things that was said. I'll make sure the terracotta compost pots get in the email so that we all have that. And a fuller description. Yes. Okay. They definitely want to hear more about the terracotta compost pots.
Okay.
So,
it's basically a terracotta cylinder. You could use chicken wire and make a cylinder. It's just something that's compact and enclosed to hold all that stuff together and give it enough depth to decompose. But I'll definitely send pictures of my terracotta pots for everybody to try to recreate.
We'll make sure you get the information you need. So thank you, everybody, for joining us, and have a great rest of your day.
Take care.
Bye, guys.
Bye.